Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. China's population officially peaked in 2021, and as a result, the population of the entire world is peaking sooner than expected in 2084, according to the United Nations. What's behind it? China's rapidly falling fertility rates, and with roughly 300 million Chinese retiring over the next 10 years, close to the entire US population, what does this aging society mean for Beijing's economic and military ambitions, and more broadly for US-China competition? Could the demographic trend lines persuade Beijing that its window of opportunity to carry out aggression is closing? And would this mean Xi Jinping is running out of time for a possible Taiwan contingency? Joining us today are Chen Ming-chi, National Tsinghua University Institute of Sociology Associate Professor, and Herlin Chien, National Pingtung University of Science and Technology College of Humanities and Social Sciences Professor. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today. A United Nations report published in July found that China's population, which is currently at 1.4 billion, will split down the middle to over 630 million by the end of the century. And of that population, less than 45% will be of working age. Indeed, by 2040, 1 in 2 people aged over 65 across the Asia-Pacific will be living in China. Professor Chien, let me come to you first. So the Nikkei reports that kindergartens are closing across China. You know, in your view, why is it that the fertility rates in China are falling so fast?
Well, first of all, of course, it's the very aggressive one-child policy since 1979. And they have contributed, and they have belated lift of the restriction on birth bearing. So it's only on the 2016 and 2021, they gradually sort of relax the restriction on birth rate. Second is a more urban population. The young couple adopt a more cosmopolitan value about, they see child more as a liability. You have to invest a lot, and then asset, unlike in the rural area. So this too is very important. And third is about the whole, China's economy now. After COVID, during COVID, it's quite depressing, and now it's even worse. The economy has coming down a lot, so the young couples see no future for their possible children, so they sort of do not want to bear any more children.
So the change over the past couple of years from the UN predictions, it sounds like that's actually due to the worsening economy.
Yes.
Yeah, where we're seeing that very sharp decline. Okay, Professor Chien, let's take a look at these charts which show China's population in comparison to India and the US. Take us through, how do you interpret these charts in terms of what will happen in the future?
I don't think China's one-child policy is the one that we need to blame, because it's a bit unfair to overlook the benefit of limiting China's population during the past decades. China is the first developing country that left a lot of the poor population out of its poverty. So it might contribute a little bit to this one-child policy to limit the growth of the populations.
Well, there's two different things that we're talking about there, isn't it? One is poverty rates, and the other is to do with overall population growth. So is your argument that it's actually the drop in the fertility rates is not down to one-child policy?
My argument is that population does not automatically turn into a bonus. It does not necessarily mean a positive thing. Only if you can feed your population economically sufficient to feed this population. Otherwise, it might drag your economic growth, like the neighboring developing countries.
Right, and of course that was the objective, wasn't it, of the one-child policy. So China experienced that boom and the boon of limiting its population when it needed to essentially have one of the best dependency ratios, Professor, in the world.
No, I mean, the thing is that China's one-child policy is too radical and too comprehensive. And in its execution, it's too broad and too harsh. So it caused a lot of tragedy. Actually, during the year when China first issued the, never been a one-child policy per se. It's a bunch of letters to the youth league and things like this and that, sort of combine, form a policy we call the one-child policy. But before the one-child policy, in the 70s, China have advocate for delayed, you begin to give birth to child later in your age, and less frequent, and less children. So that had already contributed to the very positive population consequence in the late 70s. So I mean, this was built upon miscalculation. Many people has pointed out, many scholars point out that that was too radical and unnecessary. As you improve, and most of the world's experience has proved that once you improve the women's life chance, they raise their education level, sort of they will have less children. So it could have been a gradual thing, but not like a sudden drop in the late 70s and early 80s. There was the harshest period of the one-child policy. So you can see that the population consequence is very severe. You have a sudden drop of the population. And this whole correction comes too late and too little. So first is a two-child policy. Only in 2021, they begin to have the three-child policy.
Yeah, but then mothers and fathers were not interested
No,
in that.
it's very expensive to have a child nowadays. And given the dismal situation of the economy, I think people have a less incentive to have child.
Professor Chien, so do you agree, in terms of population, not in terms of economic growth, that the one-child policy was completely unnecessary, as Professor Chien said?
Like I mentioned, I think.
Let me put it this way: is China now paying the price for the one-child policy in terms of its population decline?
I still want to maintain that now, even though we see depopulation is becoming a reality in China, but with the advance of the technology in the future, and then also given the fact that our human growth already exceed the planetary boundaries, that producing too many babies does not necessarily mean positive things. We see many developed countries with not very large populations. So we just need to have enough people and then to consume the right amount of the ecosystem services and food, etc. Otherwise, producing too many children might be a disaster for our planet.
Might be a drain on those resources. So, do you think that China could still attain that high income status with a much reduced population? If we take a look at the 2050, which is their deadline, isn't it? 2049, when they want to achieve that. When you look at that dependency ratio, what's your analysis of that? Do you think that they could, reach that?
So now China is standing in the very important crossroads, because this depopulation is like a time bomb, where the time is ticking. So it's up to China to really think about how to twist this scenario to its advantage. So by training and focusing on the quality of its population rather than quantity, to improve its education, its training, and then how to utilize technology to help to transform China's economy from a more labor-intensive into slowly move into a knowledge-based or a service-based economy. I think that's the key for the future.
The advanced economies, and say in the West, they are much smaller populations as well. But with those countries, they did reach that high income level at about the same time before, or seeing that population decline. So, what are the particular challenges that China faces, given that it hasn't done that and its population has already peaked? and it's declining rapidly.
So not only about the number is big or not, it's about the structure of the population. You have, as you mentioned, a very severe case of the old age dependency. That means, and they don't have any social welfare. They have an elementary social welfare system. You don't build a social safety net, so there will be a big trouble when people reach old age. They don't have means to care for themselves. I think this in China, the demographer in China call it like, become old before you become rich. So 未富先老. I think that is the main concern of many demographer in China even. So I think this is quite a challenge for them. Listen, one big issue is that, the fertility policy, almost every society has its own fertility policy. But the problem is that China is too effective to carry it out because of the dictatorship in this. So, every level of the cadres, even down to the village level, they have to execute what they are asked for from the high up. So they do it in a very radical way. It's not about planning a vision. It's a thing that you have to carry it out. At the local level, they call it one veto vote. That means if you miss the target set by you from your superior on this area, population control, then you will never be promoted. So this is the thing, this is not about this or that policy. It's about the style, the structure of this authoritarian regime.
Okay, now both, let's take a look at another chart which shows working age populations, 15 to 64 years of age for different countries. In comparison with China, we have India and China above, and then below, first of all, is US on blue, Indonesia in purple, Philippines in light blue, and Japan in pink. So, Professor Chien, if we could show that map again, the chart, how critical can we say China's population challenges are? Is it a crisis?
Well, looking at this graph, the problem is, are those working age population are able to find jobs? Given that in the post-COVID area, looking for a job for the young generation is becoming a nightmare. The unemployment rate for the young reached 13, even higher in July, 17%. So I think the problem is not only the shrinking of those population, it is the working age people, are they able to find jobs now? And then another perspective to fix this population crisis of China, because in other part of the country...
So you do think it's a crisis?
I do think that in the long-term future, it will be a crisis. So it's up to the government to really think of an alternative strategy to treat this crisis into an opportunity. For the other countries, giving birth is only one way of increasing population. Promoting migration is another way, especially promoting skillful and talented migrations. But that would be very challenging for China's society because China wants to emphasize its social stability. Opening up the Chinese society to more global migration might be a problem because it cannot control the ideology. So it might be up to China's government and authority to think of how smart they can craft this and then integrate it with the birth rate problem now.
I mean, the only solution, Professor Chien, is migration if you have a low fertility rates.
Yeah, among many, but I think this is most effective way. But many countries, even in Europe, they have a very strong political current against the immigration. But from a demographic point of view, I think that is a way to solve this problem effectively and immediately.
Right, yeah, because extending retirement or pushing back retirement ages would only work to a certain extent, right? So Xi Jinping often quotes the 1.4 billion Chinese people either in his own wishes toward taking Taiwan or his displeasure at other nations, such as the US. In a speech to mark 100 years of the CCP in July 2021, he said any attempts to subjugate China would result in, I quote, heads bashed bloody against a great wall of steel forged by over 1.4 billion Chinese people. So let's take a look at our chart again. And in particular, let's have a look at Indonesia and the Philippines. These are all claimants in the South China Sea. They also have growing military links with the United States and India. What does it mean for these countries' current asymmetric balance, Professor Chien, with China? I mean, at the moment, there is a huge difference, but in the future, that will not continue to be the case.
But even combined, I don't see that a Southeast Asian country can compare with the size of Chinese population. They are huge, massive. The largest country in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, that is a little bit more than.
But if we see the chart, I think it extends to 2100, which is the end of the century.
Yes, but that's the end.
That's
a projection. Close. We don't know whether they urbanize. And then getting rich, they are still. Admittedly, that Islam is a pro fertility culture, so they have the potential, but we don't know. But because you base upon a lot of assumption. Because like during the late 70s, China also built its fertility policy upon a projection. So I think we got to be very careful about this. So for the time being, yes, we do see a lot of potential in the Southeast Asian countries, especially in the as a production force. They are sort of receiving a lot of factory that are moving away from China. So that is quite optimistic. But whether this trend will continue till the end of the century, I think there's a lot of uncertainty.
Now, in 2012, political scientist Graham Allison coined the term the Thucydides trap for US-China competition. Allison used the term to describe a tendency towards war when a rising power, exemplified by Athens in his example, challenges the status of a ruling power, exemplified by Sparta. These were the ruling cities in Greece, ancient Greece. Allison explored the term further in his 2017 book, Destined for War, in which he argued that China and the US are currently on a collision course for war. Allison studied 16 cases of great power rivalry, and in 12 of them over the past 500 years, the result was, in fact, war. Professor Chien, let me come to you. So if we look at the US and China, we could say that perhaps over the past 3 decades, you have the US as the ruling power, that's Sparta, and China as the rising power, which is Athens. Now, we've been accustomed to think that for China, time is on its side, but if that rising power believes that it is about to decline, perhaps because of population drop, what course would it take? Would it be the one to trigger war? Like some analysts, such as Hal Brands, believes that China's aging and shrinking population would trigger that course toward war. How do you read it, Professor Chien? Would it trigger it, or is it more likely to decrease the chances of war?
I think we cannot predict international relation or interstate warfare in a vacuum, meaning out of the context. In the ancient time, in the time of the Sparta and Athens, there is no globalization or division of the labor in the world markets. And then so Sparta did not heavily depend on Athens to provide the essential daily goods. If we look at the US and China, we cannot forget that US still imports 400 to 500 billions of goods every year from China.
Trade is actually increasing.
Yes, trade is actually increasing. And also US need Chinese goods, while the US also export to China around 100 to 150 billion. So this trade deficit also bind these two countries together, even though we often talk about how they compete. But we should not forget that they are also closely interdependent on each other's.
But that's why that the US is trying to de-risk, isn't it? It's trying to reduce the dependency.
Right,
Is
right.
your point that it cannot do that?
It's very difficult because it will make things made in USA very expensive that the everyday people, everyday American, they cannot afford. If you go to Walmart, it's all made in China goods. It's very difficult. Maybe you can probably have some high-end goods manufactured in the US, but it's very difficult to move away from that, especially what the daily people need. So this strong dependency will make war very unlikely, I think. Yes, they will compete. And I think the solution is for US and China to find its place in the world, either economically or military. They should not provoke each other.
Professor Chen, I'd like to get your view. Do you think that if China thinks that its population is dropping, does it think that the window for aggression is closing?
It's very difficult to tell, as Professor Chen just mentioned. War depends upon a lot of factors, and the internal social structures is one among a lot of things. I know the argument comes from the so-called pig power trap. It's describing the Germany before World War I and Japan before World War II, when the industrialization and the population reach a certain peak, and they sense that they are going to decline from there, so they want to have a preventative strike first. We don't know whether the history will repeat themselves, but it's, as people mentioned, certainly it rhymes. So there is some danger there, but there is also other factor have to consider, including the difficulty of launching a modern time war, and whether China. We see China as at the peak, the whole population getting older. They sort of feel less aggressive. Especially as experience a COVID, experience the dictatorship, lockdown. I think many people are just getting tired.
Do you think there's also a fear that, if we saw that the working age, which we could say that's a proxy for the military age, which is 15 to 45 men, if you wiped out a considerable proportion of those men fighting, then that would exacerbate the problems.
But never underestimate dictator. For their survival, they will do a lot of things. Wipe out a whole generation is never a really concern for China. Don't forget about the Great Leap Forward in the late 50s. It almost wiped out a huge 10% or more than 10% of population at that time. The dictator doesn't really care about that. The most important thing is survival.
Right. And Professor Chen, finally, we also talked about some of the other methods that perhaps China is looking at in terms of trying to ensure that that decline in population doesn't constrain its economic or military power. How effective do you think things like drones or AI-capable weaponry in the military, and also, for example, in textile companies, they're now using robots apparently to do that, so that before, where there might have been 100 workers before to operate a textile factory, now there only needs to be a handful. What do you think about, the potential of these technologies?
Right. I think AI and automation can certainly help to fill in the gap of the population. However, China has to make sure that this technology is affordable to its business, is cost-effective. And then another thing to consider is China needs to make sure that those AI or those advanced technology is in its own control. It's not controlled by the foreign power. So it's up to the Chinese government to either train or improve its control in terms of those manufacturing of those AI-related products. and then turn into its advantage. Otherwise, it's very easy to fall under the Western powers' influence again if we take on that road.
Professor Chien, just want to give you the final words.
Will AI be a solution? But in the broader context of the high unemployment rate of the society, especially for the young men, I think they would be very cautious if they want to replace the robot, to sort of replace the human being. I think the Chinese policymaker will be very cautious, whether they will destroy jobs or they will create jobs.
Okay, so Ming-chi and Herlin Chien, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
We bring you stories from Taiwan.
Every day of the week.
Our reporters travel the nation.
Exploring the issues that matter to you.
News from here in Taiwan and around the world.
What's Up Taiwan on Taiwan Plus.
At Connected, we believe in the power of dialogue. It's not just about the headlines, it's about finding common ground. Join the conversation.
Connected with Divya Gopalan on Taiwan Plus.